I used to believe loyalty still had a place in the corporate world, that trust wasn't just a relic we kept alive in our personal lives while leaving it to rot in boardrooms and glass towers. I thought if you treated people with respect, if you worked hard and extended a hand instead of a knife, the universe might repay you in kind. But that was before I met Evan Drake, before I learned that betrayal wears the face of friendship and sits right beside you while nodding at your victories. My name is Ellis Mercer, and if you're listening to me now, it's because I want you to feel what it's like when the ground under your feet vanishes and the only thing left is the weight of every decision you've ever made crashing back onto your chest. I was 34 when it all began. Not young, not old, just right at that dangerous middle place where ambition feels like oxygen and failure feels like suffocation. I worked for Bellington & Cross, a multinational consulting firm where competition wasn't a culture, it was the bloodstream. We fed off one another's hunger. Promotions weren't given, they were carved out of the skin of whoever stumbled beside you. Still, I thrived there. My team had pulled off 2 of the company's biggest wins in the last fiscal year, and my name was finally being whispered in the same sentences as partner track. It should have been my season of triumph. Instead, it became the season of my unraveling. Evan was the kind of guy who made friendship look easy. He had that effortless charm that managers loved and coworkers couldn't resent. A wide smile, a handshake that felt personal, jokes delivered just shy of unprofessional, but always enough to lighten the tension. He wasn't my best friend, he never would have been, but in the office, he was close enough. We shared drinks after late nights, swapped stories about bosses' quirks, even caught a couple of games together. If I'd ever stopped to think about it, I'd have realized I didn't actually know much about Evan outside the office. But who does in our world? We bond over deadlines and boardrooms, not over truths. The project that put me on the map was called Horizon. It wasn't just another account. It was the one that could reshape our sector. A multinational client in renewable energy wanted a complete restructuring of their expansion strategy. Whoever won them over would secure not just millions in revenue, but the kind of credibility that could crown a career. I spent weeks obsessing over every angle. I barely slept. My apartment became a war room of whiteboards, sticky notes, and empty coffee cups. And when the pieces started to align, when my model began to reveal a plan so airtight it made my heart race, I trusted Evan with it. Not all of it, not every secret, but enough. He was my sounding board, my check against blind spots. He offered feedback with a sincerity that seemed unshakable. He'd slap me on the back and say, "Ellis, this is genius. You're going to own that room." The day came to present the Horizon plan to the client. I walked into that sleek conference space armed with confidence and adrenaline. My deck was flawless, my narrative strong. But as the presentation unfolded, I noticed something strange in the client's expressions. Not skepticism, but recognition. Eyes flicking, nods exchanged, the faint trace of déjà vu in their reactions. When I finished, the applause was polite, the questions perfunctory. But I knew. I knew in the silence between their words that they had heard it all before. 2 days later, the news broke. Our rival firm, Holloway Strategies, had pitched Horizon the week before. Not just a similar idea, not just overlapping strategy, my framework, my language, down to the way I staged the rollout timeline. It was as if someone had lifted the blueprint directly from my files and handed it to them with a bow. I remember staring at the email announcing the client's decision to move forward with Holloway, my mouth dry, my chest hollow. All that work, all those nights, stolen. My first thought was, how? My second was, who? In consulting, leaks happen. Competitors sniff around. People jump firms with loose tongues. Sometimes even clients whisper to test leverage. But this was surgical. Someone had access. Someone had taken it, and someone wanted me ruined. The board didn't care about betrayal. They cared about results. To them, it didn't matter that I had been robbed. What mattered was that we lost a cornerstone client, and the fingerprints were on my work. I was summoned to a meeting the next morning, a room where mahogany tables and frosted glass tried to hide the knives they slid between your ribs. The partners sat like judges, faces neutral but eyes sharp. They asked me how Holloway could have possibly known my approach. They asked if I'd been careless, if I'd spoken too freely at conferences, or left documents unsecured. Every answer I gave sounded weaker than the last. By the time the meeting ended, I wasn't the rising star anymore. I was the liability. Job security, that fragile illusion we cling to, evaporated in an instant. I went back to my office, staring at the skyline through glass walls that now felt like a cage. My desk was still littered with the debris of Horizon, printouts, charts, the meticulous architecture of a plan that was no longer mine. Evan knocked on the door, casual as always. He leaned in, concern painted on his features. "Rough day, huh?" he said softly. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to see the friend I thought I had. He told me not to let it eat me alive, that these things happen, that maybe it wasn't as personal as it seemed. His voice was steady, reassuring. And maybe it would have worked. Maybe I would have kept drowning in self-doubt, if not for what I saw next. Late that night, long after most of the office had emptied, I stayed behind, combing through my system, trying to find any trace of a breach. And that's when I noticed it. A series of file accesses logged under Evan's credentials, timestamps that matched the exact nights I had shared progress with him. Not just casual peeks, downloads, transfers, files pulled straight from the directories where Horizon lived. My stomach dropped, my pulse hammered in my ears. The friendly coworker, the guy who cracked jokes and bought rounds, had been copying me the entire time. He didn't just steal my work, he sold me out. I sat there in the glow of my monitor, the truth washing over me like ice water. My so-called friend had driven the knife straight into my back, and I was left holding the blade. That was the moment I understood. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his smile, that easygoing grin he used like a mask, and behind it, the hand pulling threads that left me dangling. By morning, I had rehearsed a dozen confrontations in my head. Should I storm into his office and throw the evidence on his desk? Should I march straight into the partners' meeting and lay it all out, proof in hand? Or should I wait, build a stronger case, make sure I wasn't just another desperate man accusing shadows while my reputation crumbled? In the end, fear decided for me. Fear of making one wrong move and losing the last shred of credibility I had left. I told myself to be patient, but inside, patience felt like poison. I watched Evan that day with new eyes. The way he strolled through the halls, trading laughs with associates, clapping shoulders, a king in a kingdom built on lies. He stopped by my office again, leaning casually on the doorframe. "You hanging in there?" he asked, concern soft in his voice. I nodded, masking the fire boiling in my chest. It was surreal, like staring at an actor who had rehearsed his part so well the mask never slipped. But masks always crack, and I would be there when his did. Over the next week, whispers grew louder. Clients asked questions I couldn't answer. Partners held closed-door meetings without me, and I could feel my once solid footing eroding grain by grain. Every morning I walked into the office, the weight of suspicion pressing harder on my shoulders, the sense that I was already halfway out the door. I needed leverage, something undeniable. Digging deeper into the access logs, I found what I was looking for. Evan hadn't just copied files, he'd transferred them to an external device, then erased traces that weren't supposed to be visible to anyone but IT. But he wasn't careful enough. Metadata remained, faint fingerprints on the glass. I packaged it together, timestamps, file histories, download records, until I had something even the sharpest partner couldn't dismiss. But the question haunted me. Why? What drove him to it? Was it jealousy? Greed? Did Holloway promise him a job, a payday, a piece of the empire he'd never build on his own? I thought of every conversation we'd ever had, every drink we'd shared. Had it all been part of the act? The answer came on a Thursday afternoon. I followed him, not out of some grand plan, but out of instinct. He left early, slipping out before the rest of us had closed up shop. I trailed a safe distance until he ducked into a quiet bar on the east side. And there, in the dim light, he wasn't alone. Across from him sat a man I recognized instantly, McKinley Woolery, a senior director at Holloway Strategies. The pieces clicked together in that moment with a sickening finality. Evan hadn't just leaked my strategy, he'd been in bed with them the entire time. I watched from the shadows as they leaned close, their conversation low, but their body language damning. Papers exchanged hands. A handshake sealed something final. Betrayal never looks cinematic in real life. It looks ordinary, like two men sharing a beer. But standing there, unseen, I felt the world tilt. The next step was the hardest, waiting for the right moment to strike. I couldn't just burst into the bar and expose them. That would make me look paranoid, unhinged. I needed the boardroom, the place where image was everything, where reputations were forged and destroyed. And so I waited, biding my time, building my arsenal. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A week later, the partners scheduled a review session to assess current leadership performance. It was code for bloodletting, and I was the lamb they meant to test. I walked into that boardroom with my pulse hammering, but my mind sharp. The partners sat in a semicircle, their faces carved from stone. Evan was there too, invited as part of the team, sitting with an air of false humility, the perfect coworker who just wanted what was best for the firm. They began with questions. Why had Horizon been lost? What steps had I failed to take? Was my strategy truly original, or had I leaned too heavily on publicly available data? Every word was designed to cut deeper, to push me into desperation. And then, when the silence opened, I stood. I didn't argue, I didn't beg. I laid down the evidence. One by one, I walked them through the logs. File names, access points, timestamps, transfers. I showed them how the documents moved, when they moved, and under whose credentials. Evan shifted in his seat, his composure cracking just slightly, a bead of sweat tracing his temple. I didn't stop there. I told them about the bar, about McKinley Woolery, about what I saw exchanged. I slid a photograph across the table, grainy, taken on my phone from across the street, but enough to show the truth. Evan Drake and McKinley Woolery, shaking hands like partners in crime. The silence that followed was suffocating. The partners glanced at one another, unspoken words passing between them. Then their eyes turned on Evan. He stammered, tried to spin a story about misunderstandings, about helping a friend, about files accessed in error. But the damage was done. The mask was shattered. His charm, his easy smile, it all crumbled under the weight of cold facts. Watching him flail was almost painful, but not enough to erase the months of humiliation he had dragged me through. When the meeting ended, it was Evan, not me, who left under escort. His badge deactivated, his future in ruins. The partners didn't apologize to me. They never do. But they didn't fire me either. My place, once on the edge of collapse, was steady again. Not triumphant, not celebrated, just steady. But the victory was hollow. I'd exposed him, yes. I'd cleared my name, salvaged what was left of my career. But trust, that fragile currency, was gone. Every handshake, every smile, every promise in that office now felt suspect. I walked out of the boardroom that day, not as the man I'd been when Horizon began, but as someone harder, colder. The lesson was carved into me like stone. Betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people sitting closest to you, the ones you never think to guard against until it's already too late. And so when people ask me what it's like to work in this world, I don't talk about the money or the prestige or the corner office views. I tell them it's like living in a glass tower where everyone smiles, but everyone's waiting for the moment you slip. Because in the end, the knives don't come from the shadows. They come from the friend standing right beside you. This story may be over, but the betrayals never stop. Like this video, share it with your circle, and subscribe to Chronicles of Revenge so you don't miss what's coming next. Another shocking story is just one click away below.